I'm here to hopefully help you crochet. First thing you need to do is check your yarn that you're using. It's going to tell you what size it is, and it's going to give you recommendations for hooks or needles. If you're crocheting, you need the hook one, which is going to be the 4mm. However, if you are just starting out with crochet, I recommend sizing your hook up. So when they recommend a 4mm, that's going to look like this one, which is a pretty good size, but when it goes to hook the strand, there's not a whole lot of extra space in the hook. So it's going to be a lot more likely that you may be able to slip it off, or that you're going to make your tension too tight, which will make it really hard to get this hook into your work once you've got it started. So for a 4mm yarn, if you're new, I would recommend a 5mm hook. So to go up 1mm, it's going to grab the yarn a lot easier. There's a lot more space on the hook. So there's a lot less chance of, when you're pulling it, that you're going to slip it off the hook. And then it's going to be bigger, which is going to be slightly more forgiving when you're working. So the difference in hooks, this is what it recommends, and this is what I would recommend. It's just sizing up one size. Okay, now we're going to start a foundation chain. So the first thing you have to do is to make a slip knot. There's going to be a lot of ways that people tell you how to do this. What I like to do is I'll hold it like this. It doesn't really matter. This is going to be called a tail end, and this is your working end. It doesn't really matter which way is which. You're just going to put your fingers in this loop, twist it, and you're going to grab one of these and pull it like this. It really doesn't matter which way you do it. So like I can switch it here to where the tail is on the left side again, or this time. Twist it, doesn't really matter. Pull it through. I recommend putting it down your hook a little bit and just pulling the two until it's just tight. You don't want it like super duper tight because you're not going to be able to get your hook into this. So I'll put it just to where it's like that. Now we're going to drop the tail. We don't need that. And you're going to start with your working end. I like to unravel a little bit. If you're new, I recommend that, because then you're not going to have like a really tight tension tugging on the end here. You're just going to have a little more freedom. So I am right-handed when I crochet, and the way I like to hold it is I put these two fingers together and I come under, or I come over, and then my pinky is at the end and it pinches it. This is going to give me my tension, and then this is going to give me my control. So while I'm working, these are going to hold the work. This is going to be able to help control. If I have too much here, then I just have to pull my finger up and it's going to pull that tight so I can work on it. And if I have too little, if I'm too tight, then I can just release the tension with my pinky, and then I'm controlling it with my index finger. So when you're doing your foundation chain, get it ready. I like to use this finger to hold the stitch. I do this when I knit too. Hold the tail as if it's your working piece. And then you're gonna wrap that around the hook. Grab that little knot here. I like to turn my hook here towards the knot. So if you look, it's going to be like a little V shape. Turn it towards the knot, pull it through, and that's a chain one. Wrap it over, turn the hook, chain two. Okay? I'm going to come back. We're going to do this a few times. Now, when I work at full speed, you're going to see me do something like this. I don't even have to look. I can feel when my hook has gone through. This is not what it's going to look like for anyone else. So now we have a foundation chain. My tension is relatively even, but even with my even tension, you can see this stitch is bigger than this stitch, for example. You're going to have a variance in your tension. That's completely normal. So if we're working on a project that is not round, you're going to have a foundation chain like this. Like I said, I like to wrap it, hold the work you're working on, hold this, Now this first stitch is almost always skipped. There will be some cases where they're going to make you work into that, not often. So now we're going to go into the second chain. So that's 1, 2. All right, you see those 2 stitches? We're going to go through that. We're going to yarn over. Remember to turn the hook and come through. Yarn over, come through. And that's a stitch. Now be careful because this very open stitch is actually the one we just worked in, if you can see it there. So make sure you're going into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through the 2. We just worked through that open stitch. Okay, now I'm going to work through the rest of that. Okay, so that's the first row on a foundation chain for single crochet. If we're going to keep doing single crochet, when we hit this end stitch, we're going to chain 1 and literally just flip the work this way. So now we're looking at the back of it. Like you're literally just flipping it one way to the other. And then instead of going into one stitch, you're going to look at the top here. And there's little V's. These V's, you're going to work through those. Sometimes you might see something say front post only, or like back of the stitch only, or something like that. So if it said front stitch only, then this front part of the V is all you would go into. Back stitch, obviously you'll skip that, go into the back stitch. That's how you create ribbing. But for a normal stitch, you're just going to go underneath both sides of the V, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. So again, both sides of the V here, underneath them, so it looks like that. There's 2 little pieces there. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Now if you were at the end of this row, so we're going to come back like we just finished the row again. All right, so here's the last stitch of the row. My tail back over there. So we're going to go in, last stitch on the foundation chain. Now if your next row needed to be double crochet, we're going to chain 2. 1, 2, and then turn. And this time you're going to yarn over first, then go under. This is where I hold the yarn. Then go under the stitch. Yarn over, or you can yarn over this way, or you can yarn over this way. It doesn't matter, but you yarn over, pull through that, yarn over, pull through only 2 stitches, so there'll still be 2 on here. Yarn over, pull through, and that's a double crochet. So yarn over into the stitch, pull it through 1, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and that's a double crochet. So now we're going to pull all of this out, because I saw some of you guys were talking about working in a circle. So I'm going to show you how I do a circle. We're not going to keep this original slip knot. We're going to pull that out. We're going to do something totally different. Okay, so when you're working in the round, sometimes you'll see them have you start with a foundation chain like before, and then you just connect the ends. I'll do that one in a second if you guys need it. I like to do a magic ring. Everybody starts a magic ring a little bit differently. This is the way I do it. I find it to be the easiest. So you're gonna take your little tail piece, and some ways down, this can be as long as you need. I take it a little longer if you need it. Grab your yarn like you're gonna start working. And then you're going to twist the yarn and hold it in your hand. Okay. This part is important. So when you're twisting it, imagine like a little E, like the letter E, but the tail has to be in the back. You see how it's beneath the working end piece? If you do it this way, it's not going to work out as well. So make sure that when you have this little E flipped, that the part closest to the tail is behind the other part. Now we're going to grab where those two are joined. So where those two cross, grab that. Do not let go of this join. Okay, keep that right between those two fingers. You're going to come into the loop, yarn over, pull it through, right? This looks complicated, just don't let go. You're going to yarn over. If I can do this. There we go. And pull through, so like we chained one. And then we're going to go into this loop. Use your finger as a guide if you need to. Yarn over, pull through. Yarn over, pull through those. Okay. Now to continue the stitches, that's one. You're just gonna, just like you're single crocheting, keep your tail out of the way, into the circle, bring it up, into the circle. And so normally they'll probably have you do 6, so we'll do a couple more. 6 to 8 is usually what they have you start as, depending. I think that's 7. So I'm going to pull this out a little bit. It's going to be kind of hard to see at first, but we do have our stitches there. So now, you see this little cross bit? When it's time to close the circle, you're just going to tug on this tail. So I'll put this in here, and I'll have it here, just so we don't lose anything. And then you just pull the tail, and you've got a circle. It's not a closed circle, so it's going to be kind of hard to see. But it is a circle. And so now, if I hold it like this, you can see we got the circle. So now, when we go to crochet in the round, we're going to hold it like this. And that first V stitch, it's a little hard to see. That first V stitch is the one that we're going to go into. If you need to, I'm trying to get closer to the camera and it's not focusing. Use your fingernail, come through one, and then use your fingernail to come through, like to just grab the second and slip it on. Once you get this started, it's going to be so much easier. So something else you can do if you're struggling to see that. So remember, we sized up our hook. We can do that again. So I'm going to come over here and grab, how many is this? 6 millers. So this is another one step up. So this is even bigger than the last one. So we'll do the magic circle again. Remember that the E tail is in the back. Come through, do that, into the circle, over, bring it through. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, as a lot of ones will have you do. Now, once you get that done, drop this hook, bring back the one you're going to work with, and so now we're going to close the circle. You don't have to close it completely right now. Now, to be really positively sure of where your stitch is, you can start from your hook. So we see this first V, that's stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and right there at the end is 8. So see how I had to twist that? Sometimes that'll happen. So now, making sure we're holding the working piece, remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This one is 8. It's a little bit loose because we used the bigger one, so I've got to chase that back one. But there's that stitch. So we're just going to slip stitch, which means bring it through, but instead of yarning over and doing a single crochet, I'm just going to keep bringing that one through. So now I have closed a ring. Now we have that hole. Pull that tail even tighter, and that hole disappears. So now some will have you work in the round. So that means just working like I'm just going to single crochet this next one. And I'm just going to keep doing this all the way around. It'll probably have you increase, which means doing the single crochet, and then in that same one you just did, do another single crochet. Now we're going to do 2 without it. Now this one's going to increase again. So we do it once, go back in that hole, do it again. So something like that. This last stitch is the one we slip stitched. It may be tight. Work it in. And then we have the second row, and you can see because of the type of increase I did, this is what I would be doing for an amigurumi, so it's going to be more of a sphere instead of a flat circle. Flat circles are going to have a different rate of increase versus just single crochet. If this were wanting you to not do a spiral shape, it may have you chain 1 and then start working on the rounds. It's gonna look basically the same. They're more or less gonna be the same. So in one you'll have this spiral, and in the other one you might see where you've chained up. It depends, and it's going to, the seam of that is going to go diagonal anyway. It's not just going to be a straight line in the back, it's going to be slightly diagonal, because when you increase on a circle, usually it's going to be like a hexagon or an octagon. But that's how you do a circle. Now back to when I said sometimes it may want you to do a foundation chain into a circle. Once again, this one especially will be a lot more important. Grab that bigger hook. Foundation chains are almost always tight. Even for us experienced people, it's almost always going to be tight, and it's going to be wonky because you don't have a full stitch to go into. You're essentially going into half a stitch. So your foundation chain is almost always going to be tighter, so I do recommend sizing up, especially if you're new. So let's say it wants us to do 8 again, so we're going to chain 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This hook is sticky and I'm concerned. So once we do that, it's going to want us to come join here. So you're going to go into that first stitch, most likely. Some patterns may be different. Always trust the pattern if you can. Usually those of us who make patterns are going to double check it ourselves, and we're going to follow our pattern to make sure it makes sense. Sometimes that doesn't happen. That's awful. Feel free to tag me anytime you have a question. I will do my best to help. So you're going to bring it in, and you're going to slip stitch. So remember that that's coming in and going right through the other one. So now we have a circle. Usually they're going to make you do this smaller, like maybe 4 or 6. It's really hard to do that. That's why I recommend the magic ring way, like the way I said. But that's how you would most likely join this way. Like I said, usually it's going to make you do 4s. Like if we come back, 4 is so hard to do. Hold your knot, chain 4. And then you're going to come through that first one. It's going to have you slip stitch, and so this is what you're looking at. I don't recommend it. It's so hard. But again, same thing as with the magic ring. If you need to count to find where your first stitch is, like you can't see where in this mess the first stitch is, start at your hook, right? So if I hold my hook here, this very first V shape, stitch 1. Stitch 2, we're going to bring it up. This is stitch 3. So this right here is stitch 4. This is the one that we need to go into. So I don't think I have one over here. I have stitch markers usually. 1 second. Okay, I grabbed my stitch marker bag. So this is something I made also that I use to hold my stitch markers. And you can see working in the round you'll have a little bit of a seam as you increase, but this is a magic circle, so that hole is extremely close. And then this was done, this rib side, to give me like a flat bottom, was done by working in one side of the stitch only, which created that sharper turn. So anyway, when you are working in the round, you're going to want a stitch marker. It doesn't have to look like this one, but you're going to want it because when you're counting this, you can use your stitch marker. So again, we start here. Here's the first stitch, second stitch, third stitch, and then just turn it over, and this extra wide V here is our fourth stitch. So you're going to come underneath that bottom step part of the stitch, come up under the top part of the stitch, just snap that closed. We know that that is our first stitch that we need to go into. And so now I would switch from the big hook to the actual hook, and with the stitch marker in place, we know that's our next stitch. So now we just slide in right next to the stitch marker. Use your nail if you have to. Right there. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through both. So that's one. We've done the first stitch. Usually it's going to have you increase for the next one. So keep that stitch marker in there. We see that that whole stitch is the fourth stitch. That whole stitch. So we need this one, which is the third stitch. So remember, turn it to the side, but look to the V if you have to. Even with a stitch marker, if you've somehow lost this next stitch, start back at the hook. 1, 2, 3. So we know that this is the third stitch. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. And you'll do that until you come back around to this stitch marker. You can use a second stitch marker. So like we've done the first one, and this is marking the fourth stitch in the original row. So now if you want to grab another stitch marker to mark the first one of this row, turn it so you can see the V. That first stitch we just did, just pop another stitch marker right there, and we know that that is the first stitch. So now when we work around, it's going to be easier to know where to stop. So we're going to increase on this one because we did the first one without it. So back in. Okay, we have 2 more stitches. Turn it to the side. Right there. That's the next V. We're just going to single crochet for this one. And now the last stitch here before our first stitch marker is going to be an increase. Now because we used a bigger hook, these stitches are going to be a little easier to get into, but they are also going to be a lot looser. But when you're new, I find that that's probably honestly going to be better. So now we increase this one. So now we've done 2 stitches and increased twice. So we've added 2 stitches to our round, so now we have 6. So you're going to be able to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 right up here with our little stitch marker. So now the first stitch marker, we don't need that anymore. That's for a round that we're not going to be using. So same as before, this one is marking the first stitch of the old row. So when we go to start this new row, or round, we're going to go in here. I made that way too tight. That's a me problem. We're going to go into here, single crochet, and now this first stitch, we're going to mark it, So now that's our first stitch of the round. And then we'll just continue. And eventually it'll start growing. So you can see that this one versus the magic ring, that hole in the middle is not going to get any smaller. We have no way, no matter how much we tug on the tail, that center circle is not going to get any smaller. You're always going to have that hole in the middle, which is why when working in the round, not only is it a little more forgiving to work the other way, but it's going to be a lot less messy. Both ways I recommend using stitch markers. If you don't have an actual stitch marker like this, you can use safety pins. Safety pins work just as good. You can use floss. I have floss on my desk. You would just thread it through, maybe tie one little knot. Not a tight knot, just a very loose knot. You can use a scrap of other yarn if you have another yarn. The cleanest way, if you're able, would be either stitch markers or safety pins. You could use a paper clip in a pinch. That would work pretty good too. But hopefully that helps you get started. If you have any questions, tag me on Twitter. I would be glad to try and take pictures, maybe other videos, something to help you get started or troubleshoot whatever you're working on. If you have a pattern that's giving you trouble and you want to see how a specific piece of that pattern is done, feel free to tag me. I would love to help you guys enjoy crochet.